The creaky old Victorian at 13 Blackwood Lane was a Gothic injury against the grey sky, the peeling paint and crooked gables a reminder of decades of abandonment. For Maya, Chloe, and Liam, it was an unbelievable bargain, a mansion in return for the price of a small apartment. The estate agent, a fidgety man who had declined to enter, had merely complained of previous occupants departing suddenly before dropping them the keys and driving off in haste. Liam, being an eternal optimist, envisioned infinite possibilities. Chloe, an artist with a free spirit, was entranced by the strange, otherworldly light. But Maya, the most perceptive of the three, experienced a profound, visceral shiver as soon as she stepped inside. "The air is off here," she breathed, her voice consumed by the cavernous, dusty entrance hall. "It's as if the house is listening." The early days were a blur of unpacking and forced laughter. The house was a labyrinth of dark timber and peeling wallpaper, full of the creaks and groans of ancient wood settling. The peculiarities started quietly. Liam was forever discovering his carefully arranged tools lying around the basement floor. Chloe's drawings, abandoned on the turret room desk, would be discovered with odd, furious scratch marks disfiguring the edges. But the first definite indication of something being seriously wrong was the ticking. It was a quiet, metallic beat, like a hidden watch in the walls. It would begin deep in the night, a gentle tick, tick, tick that would seem to travel from one room to another, perpetually just beyond grasp. Liam would spend his mornings hunting down where the sound came from, searching pipes and decaying radiators, but never discovering anything. The house's own grandfather clock, a hulking oak monstrosity in the hall, had its hand stuck at 3:07 a.m., a frozen, silent guardian to a lost moment. Then there were the whispers. Chloe was the first to notice them late at night while she painted. At first she wrote it off as the wind through the eaves. But the nights were usually quiet, and the whispers grew more distinct, sibilant, breathy voices that curled around her, just beyond comprehension. They sounded evil. And meanwhile, Maya's sleep was filled with recurring nightmares. She had visions of a tall, emaciated man with long, bony fingers and a face that was a blank, pale expanse. He would be standing at the bedside of her bed, having a bony finger pointed at her and the ghostly ticking building into a wild, ear-shattering hammering in her head. She would scream, waking up, and the sound stayed ringing in her head. Liam, attempting to cling to sanity, attributed the stress of moving in the house acoustics. But fear was a seed, and it was starting to germinate. The night of the storm was the turning point. The sky ripped apart, spilling a deluge of rain and screaming wind. A deafening crack of thunder was followed by the flickering of the lights and their extinction, plunging the house into a void of darkness and cacophony. The three of them crouched together in the living room, the weak light from their phone flashlights forming a tiny pool of light in the stifling darkness. And it was then, above the cacophony of the storm, that they heard it. A little girl's voice, clear and completely empty of feeling, sang down the hallway, "One for sorrow, two for joy." Chloe's blood chilled. "What was that?" she stuttered. The voice returned, closer this time, right on the other side of the door. "Three for a girl, four for a boy." The doorknob started to jiggle back and forth hard. Liam got up, taking a heavy fireplace poker, his knuckles clenched white. "Who is that?" he shouted, his own voice trembling. The jiggling ceased. There was silence. Then a fresh noise began, a wet, slow, screeching scrape, like fingernails pulled down the back of the wooden door very slowly. Maya started crying softly. "It's him. The man in my dreams." And then, without any warning, a low, guttural humming started. It was an old, melody-less tune that seemed to come from the walls themselves, resonating through the floorboards. As the ghastly tune filled the air, a black, tar-like liquid started oozing under the door. It was greasy and thick, moving with a malevolent intent, spreading across the floor towards them. "We have to get out," Liam shouted. They rushed to the back door, but it was stuck fast, the key turned and jammed in the lock. The windows were likewise sealed, welded tight. They were trapped. The humming intensified to a deafening roar, blending with the frantic, ghostly ticking into a symphony of unadulterated fear. The night was interminable, but with the first dawn light's gray tinge, the phenomena stopped as suddenly as they had started. Power was restored, the black slime vanished, and the house lay quiet. But forever shattered was the illusion of security. The day following they were transformed. Shadows clung to them. They set out to research Blackwood Lane's history. The local library produced nothing, the files suspiciously thin. It was an old, grizzled bartender in the town's only pub who, after some coaxing, related the tale to them. His name was Alistair Blackwood, a retired and wealthy clockmaker who had occupied the house a century before. He was mad about order and precision, and even more mad about his daughter, Elara. When she fell in love with a village boy, Alistair's jealousy soured into madness. He killed the boy and, in a final gesture of demented possession, killed Elara before hanging himself from the rafters of the main hall. But his spirit never left, the bartender murmured, getting close. They describe him as something else, a being of jealousy. He owns the house and all its inhabitants as his own. He murders one by one until he is alone once more. That's his routine. In a panic, they dashed back into the house to return their bags and make a quick escape. But as Liam attempted to exit through the front door, he was slammed back by a force that had no physical presence. It was the same at every door and window. They were captive, locked in with the ghost. That evening, the last performance started. The lights went out once more and the humming began, louder and nearer than before. Coming from upstairs, they heard a dragging, heavy noise. Looking out, Liam saw it. The ticking man. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in the moldering remains of a Victorian suit. His face was an empty, white oval, but 2 spots of devilish red light smoldered where his eyes had been. In one hand, he pulled behind him a huge, rusty pendulum from a grandfather clock, its pointed end scraping gouges into the stair's wooden surface. In the other, he carried a long, nasty-looking knife. The ticking was ear-shattering, coming from his very center. "Run! To the basement!" Liam yelled. They ran down the creaky basement stairs as the ticking man came down behind them, his stride tortuously slow and measured, the tick-tick scrape a guarantee of doom to come. The basement was an impasse. The window well, a tiny one, was their sole recourse, but the glass was reinforced. "No use," Liam exclaimed, kicking it in vain. The ticking man had reached the bottom of the stairs, his red eyes fixed on them. He raised the knife and aimed it straight at Chloe. In that moment of sheer fright, Maya recalled the story. Alistair Blackwood was a man of routine, tied to time. The clock in the hall stood still at 3:07 a.m., the time of the murders. "The time?" she shrieked. "It's his anchor." Grabbing a thick wrench, she threw it at the ancient, iced-over grandfather clock stored along the basement wall. The glass face exploded. The gears inside scraped and screamed as the hands, locked for 100 years, trembled and dropped. The ticking man released an otherworldly scream, a rip of reality. His shape wavered and contorted. The repressive force holding the doors closed dissipated. "Now!" Liam screamed. They tumbled past the thrashing creature, up the stairs, and exploded out the front door into the cold, fresh air, fleeing without once glancing back. They fell a mile away, panting and weeping. The police who came to investigate saw nothing but an old, empty house. They wrote off the tale as a group hallucination. The 3 friends left, their lives forever tainted but convinced they had emerged victorious. They were mistaken. A week later, among the bright, new security of her new flat, Maya was unpacking a box of Chloe's painting materials. At the bottom, under a cloth, was a lovely old silver locket she had never seen before. She was curious and so clicked it open. Inside was a small old photograph of a sad-eyed little girl. Written on the back, barely visible, was an inscription. Elara Blackwood, 1902. A shiver of cold fear passed over her. She had not left a piece of the terror behind. And as she stood there immobile, she could feel a warm breath on the nape of her neck, and a single intimate whisper filled the room, "Mine." The cycle was not completed. It had merely shifted.